What do you think about Judaism at that time?
At best, Judaism was a locked door. In fact, it was more than a locked door. It was a door, a secret door. Not only was it locked, but it had been plastered and painted over, so you didn't even know it was there.
It's my privilege to interview Rob Fashler, who's a close friend for many, many years, and he has a very interesting journey. Today we'll try to go through that journey. I'm sure part of his journey will be helpful to every one of us, to some of the journey of our own life. So tell us about your early upbringing.
I grew up in Montreal. I lived in neighborhoods that were secular and Jewish, Côte Saint-Luc and Hampstead. My parents were complete atheists. In fact, they were worse than atheists because they were hostile to religion. And their favorite target, never mind Christians or anybody, were Hasidim. They were simply an object of ridicule. Timeless occasions, we would be driving along the streets of Montreal, and my parents would see some Hasidim running by, and they'd say, look at these idiots, you know? Anyway, that was their attitude towards religion. What did they value? They valued materialism. Nonetheless, I had a bris. Who knows why? I think it because it was socially acceptable, and it would not be socially acceptable if I had not had a bris. But my parents were lost themselves. They were confused. They did want the best for me, and they tried their hardest, and they sent me to get good education, and they encouraged me to be successful and make a lot of money. That's what they thought was the best thing to do. And the way to do that was to be as worldly as possible. Well, worldly sounds good, international sounds good, but what it really means is to be assimilated. And so I embarked on the path of assimilation. That included a year and a half in a private Catholic school. You can imagine my first day at school when everybody got up and started doing the crossing and all of that. I got up and I was looking at them, I was trying to do the same thing. Not a good start. Fortunately, they said, no, you're Jewish, you go somewhere else. You don't have to do that stuff. Thank goodness. Unfortunately, it wasn't my parents who told me that, it was the school who told me that. I had no Jewish education, none, until the time for my bar mitzvah was approaching. At that point, again, it would be socially unacceptable not to have a bar mitzvah as a cultural thing. So they sent me to a Reform synagogue, Temple Emmanuel, where I learned how to look at Hebrew letters and make the noises that are appropriate. Or I didn't even really know whether I was making the right noises, but I knew what the letters were supposed to be, the sounds they were supposed to be making. That's all I learned. By the way, I had a horrible, horrible singing voice. I still do, as everybody tells me every time I try to sing. My parents, to teach me the bar mitzvah parsha that I had to learn, they enlisted a particular rabbi to teach me the appropriate liturgy. But that rabbi said, you have to learn to put on tefillin first. As soon as my parents heard that, they said, you're out of here. We wouldn't want to get too Jewish. So they fired him. They found another rabbi who would just teach me the liturgy without asking me to put on tefillin. And out of kindness for my horrible voice, he gave me a very simple melody. Now, the bar mitzvah story is actually quite funny. It goes on and on and on, but I don't think we have time for it. If there is time, I can return to it later on.
But still, they took you to Israel for the bar mitzvah.
This is the interesting part. Why Israel? I missed that part in my notes. Why Israel? Yes, they took me to Israel. My father was a very practical businessman, and he said, okay, this is going to be a big party, and it's going to cost me a lot of money. And if I'm going to spend that kind of money, we might as well get more out of it for the family. So he said, well, why don't we a friend of ours had gone to Israel for a bar mitzvah, and he said, why don't we do that too? And we could also make it a big trip to Europe after Israel for the entire family, have a good time. Fine. So he decided to invest his money that way. That was the motivation for going to Israel, and it was a perfectly acceptable rationale to say to the neighborhood, "Oh, he went to Israel. That's why he's not having a big party in Montreal."
So once you graduated, I guess, from your Judaism at your bar mitzvah, how were your teen years? Was there any connection there?
No, it got worse. This is essentially where the wheels came off. I was confused in every way, and I was in puberty, and it was the 60s and the 70s, and everything was the beginning of the Mishigas going on today. That's the foundation of it. Drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Unfortunately, I recklessly embraced that lifestyle. I was kind of a hippie. I was trying very, very hard to be cool. I didn't know what else to do. Nothing else was working for me. I ended up dropping out of junior college. I was taking drugs. I took a lot of LSD, and eventually, and it never really worked with me. I don't know why I kept taking it. And I ended up in the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal in the psychiatric ward because in the jargon of the times, I had freaked out. Eventually, I dug out of that, and I focused on the only thing I knew to be sort of a good thing to do in the circumstances, which was to try and be successful, try and do well at school, try and create some kind of future for myself. Along the way, I also had turned to transcendental meditation, which was very big at the time. Why? Because the Beatles had embraced it. And if it was good enough for the Beatles, it was good enough for me. So I did that. Actually, it helped me. It was just a good, calming meditation technique. By the way, it's not Buddhist, it's Hindu. But they disguise the fact that it's Hindu. But it's it's a nice little therapy. As it turns out, I ended up doing extremely well in school. I had nowhere else to channel my energies, and I put it all there. I did very well in school, and I finished McGill University, my undergraduate program, and ended up in Vancouver studying law, and I did very well there too, much to my surprise.
What do you think about Judaism at that time?
At best, Judaism was a locked door. In fact, it was more than a locked door. It was a door, a secret door. Not only was it locked, but it had been plastered and painted over, so you didn't even know it was there. It was the last conceivable thing to me as an alternative way of life, as a way to help myself through the problems I had been experiencing. It was inaccessible and hidden. To me, it was inconceivable that Judaism had anything whatsoever to offer. At worst, for me, like my parents, Judaism was an object to be ridiculed, especially the Hasidism. It never occurred to me that it held anything of value, although there were some fleeting positive glimpses that touched me briefly and quickly forgotten. Let me give you an example. I was going out for, I think it was a Saturday afternoon, I'm not sure, but I think it was a Saturday afternoon with a friend. We were going to go do some fun stuff. And he said to me, listen, we have to stop off along the way. My father insists that I attend something that's going on downtown. I said, sure. So we went downtown to Chabad of McGill University. And what had happened was his father had donated a Sefer Torah, and it might have been their first Sefer Torah. It was a big deal. Were you there? You weren't there. So they were outside the front door of Chabad, and they were holding the Sefer Torah, dancing around all these Hasidim, and this was sort of like the epitome of everything I had learned to ridicule. And I'm watching These guys dancing around with the Torah, just saying, when can we get out of here? And who are these idiots anyway? Anyway, finally, we move on. That's part one of that story. We'll come back to it because there's a second chapter for it down the road.
So I know that you were strongly involved in the Buddhist temple for many years. You were even the president of the Buddhist temple. Could you tell us, how did you get involved with Buddhism?
A client, as a lawyer, introduced me to an odd Japanese branch of Buddhism that focuses on chanting. This is not Zen, which I do have some respect for. It's something else. I have a tendency to get down, to get a little depressed, and I found it helped. I would spend some time, invest in this, and it would be an energizing thing, and it would be a calming thing, and it helped me. And it did. It was beneficial, but in retrospect, and quickly in retrospect, it was shallow. Then I stumbled onto Tibetan Buddhism, which is much deeper and much more involved, and I connected with that, and I threw myself into it. Before long, the Lama, that's their version of a rabbi, the Lama asked me to become president of a particular center. It was actually the oldest Tibetan Buddhist center in Canada. And so I was the president of the center for at least 10 years. During that time, I studied and interacted with the top gurus and leaders, and they were impressive people, actually. They had, healthy attitudes towards life and psychology and all of that stuff. And I ended up going to India at least 3 different times for 3 weeks at a time, and I attended major events there with big Buddhist leaders. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. So I'm in a place called Bodh Gaya. And there's a series of teachings going on for several days with the Karmapa. Karmapa is on the same level as the Dalai Lama, big shot. And up on the stage, there are 2 translators. One is a guy I'd encountered many times before. He was a Tibetan, probably in his 50s, very knowledgeable, really good with English, really adept in Tibetan, and knew how to communicate the Tibetan to English people. The other translator was a young American kid. And what happened over time, over from one day to the next, is more and more, the Karmapa started, relying heavily only on the Tibetan, and over time he started asking the young American kid to translate more often. By the end, the American kid was doing most of the translating. And I was puzzled by this because I knew the other guy was like #1 translator. And I said, who is this American kid? I said, oh, that's Ari. Ari? So I looked into it, and he's an American Jewish boy who is a graduate of Columbia Law School, and a brilliant kid, and that's what he was doing. But wherever you go, there are Jews. I've got another story for another time where I met an Eskimo Jew, 7th generation Jew. That's another story.
So what caused you to come home to Judaism?
3 things. First of all, Buddhism itself made it possible. I had to somehow tame my own mind and my own habitual thinking. Our habitual thinking, we're slaves to it. And so meditation actually helps. It helps you to slow down the internal chatter and to pay attention to what is actually going on inside your own mind and also in the outside world. It's actually a healthy process. That helped open me up to realities that I either could not see or refused to see. And there's a lot of the latter going on too. One of the things I realized is I'm not Tibetan. And And it also opened me up to other realities such as Judaism, that I would previously dismiss on a habitual knee-jerk basis. I had to stay open, and I was able to stay more open. That's one. Then, during all of this, at school, they knew that my daughter was Jewish, and she was a great basketball player, an outstanding basketball player. And the Canadian Maccabea team really wanted her to play on their team. So they approached her and they said, "Come on, we want you." I said, "How much?" They said, "It's going to cost you $10,000. I said, "No." Then they came back because they really wanted her. They said, "Okay, $5,000. I said, "No." The plane's about to take off, and they said, "Free, we need her." Okay. So, and she had been having kind of a difficult time in her personal life. And so as good parents, we went along to support our daughter. Ended up in Israel, and I think there's some kind of light switch they flick on as you enter the country. Suddenly I'm saying, this is nice. I'm feeling Jewish. And even more so, I like feeling Jewish. So that's the second part. Then I come back to Vancouver, and there's a third element. I have a very dear friend named Dr. Yap Hamburger, interventional cardiologist, and a music composer. You will be hearing more about Dr. Hamburger, not from me, but from the press, if you pay attention to the arts. He's writing symphonies and operas, and he's brilliant. But he's also a very good friend. And he's had always been laughing at my professed Buddhism. He said, "Yeah, you're Jewish, come on." He was right. And I came back and I told him how after going to Israel, I realized I'm Jewish. And I feel Jewish, and I like being Jewish. He said, "Well, you know what's next?" I said, "No." He says, "You have to come to shul, and especially you have to come meet Rabbi Fagelstock. You'll love him. You'll love his family, everything." I said, I resisted. I resisted for a long time. Finally, he gets me to a Kabbalah class. And I sit in the Kabbalah class. And at first I'm just taking it in. I don't know what to do. I don't talk much. I'm just paying attention. First of all, I found you very impressive, Rabbi. You had a lot of the same characteristics that I found in the big Buddhist leaders. I mean, just a nice vibration is what I mean by that. Nothing else. Secondly, the content was very interesting, and it was spiritual. It was not, I thought Judaism was about rules and rituals and all of that, but this was deeply spiritual. And that impressed me, and it connected with me because, I was a self-professed Buddhist, spiritualist, whatever, so that impressed me. And then something else, that, I was sitting there, and I felt like I'd been taken back in time, like to an old yeshiva or something. The method of teaching, the style of teaching, even the sing-song, the way that things are sometimes said. I just felt transported and enchanted. In a sense, I fell in love. Now, that's an emotional response, not an intellectual response. But that was the last thing. And with that emotional response, there was something in me that said, "Welcome home. Welcome home." And I continued. After that, I gradually connected more and more with Judaism. I experienced authentic community and bonds of friendship. I felt the trademark symbol of Chabad, which is warmth. I like warmth. I'm an emotional guy. Then, as I was exposed to Hasidus, I saw and appreciated the deep spirituality and wisdom that was there. Hasidim in my vocabulary coming there were obviously the yogis of Judaism, not your regular Reform rabbi or whatever, which is what I'd encountered before. This was genuine spirituality. And since then, gradually, Hasidus has become the candle that illuminates all other aspects of Judaism for me, which would otherwise still be behind the locked door. And in fact, I was just telling the rabbi, I've had a whole new breakthrough, which is Talmud, which I still saw as, even until very recently, I still saw as, it's just rules. I don't like rules, I'm a lawyer. I don't like laws. I was also exposed to many great teachers who nurtured and inspired me lovingly. First and foremost, yourself and your parents. When I first met your father, I was alone in Montreal visiting. I felt I was in the presence of an angel. I still feel that way about him. Then my rabbi suggested that I take a look at a particular video from Rabbi Moshe Brisky. What was it called? You Can Run, But You Can't Hide. And this hit the nail on the head and really moved me deeply emotionally. Any of you who are familiar with Rabbi Brisky, it's almost impossible to go through one of his talks without weeping. I was tremendously inspired by that video, watched it more than once. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's on, it used to be called Jewish TV, it's got a different brand. But I also was exposed to other great teachers, such as Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, Rabbi Manis Friedman, and Rabbi Shais Tob. These people all had a very strong, particular influence on me. Big impact. Finally, I developed, through the guidance of my rabbi, a very deep appreciation for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I have total trust in his words and his guidance, even now, as a living presence. And let me tell you, I'm a lawyer. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. The Rebbe, I also trust my rabbi. I learned that in this world of lies, pain, vanity, and nothingness, angels are dancing everywhere. Seriously.
Why were you searching for religion in the first place?
I was not consciously searching for religion. What I was doing was running away. I was running away from my own mistakes and my own pain. The pain of materialistic pursuits and just wasted time. The term for becoming a Buddhist is taking refuge. And that's what I was seeking. I was seeking refuge from the storm, from the darkness, from the Mishigas. Also, for most of my life, I had a deep value for truth. And it's kind of hard because there's very little truth in this world. There was then, and there's even less now. So, when I start to smell it, when I start to see it, it makes an impact, and I found truth. I needed meaning and I needed purpose in my life. And Judaism provided it better than anything else. Everything that happens, I learned, is from Hashem, including my detour with Buddhism. The door to spiritual Torah Judaism was locked and hidden, impossible. But Hashem guided me through a Buddhist detour that put me in a place where I could at least see the locked door and open it a crack.
Now that you're home with your Judaism, how would you say the difference to you was the way you felt when you were the president of the Buddhist temple and how you feel today?
Is that on here?
No?
As in the title of this talk, I'm home. I came home. I'm with my family. And it's meaningful. And it's leading somewhere. And not only does it help me, it gives me an opportunity to help others.
What do you see as the greatest challenge facing young people today?
The things that I found confusing as a young man have increased exponentially. It's really crazy right now. Aggression, division, hatred, lies everywhere. Morality has been inverted. It's been turned on its head. And not only that, people are bullied and tricked into adopting and embracing things that are so unholy and so destructive, both spiritually and just as for human beings. The metaphor that the Rebbe imparted to Benjamin Netanyahu is apt. The world is filled with darkness. It is an ocean of lies. But there is a candle that has been lit. In fact, there are thousands of candles that have been lit. And they're waiting, they're flickering in the dark for all the young people. All you have to do is come home.
What advice do you have for people who are searching today?
I'm sorry to be so repetitious. Come home. You're loved. There's meaning. There's reality. There's family. Don't allow your spiritual birthright to be concealed behind a locked door. Do not reject what you don't understand. Real treasures are always hidden. I had no idea that Judaism could be so profound. If only I had understood that brilliant spirit permeating Judaism, I could have avoided so much pain and suffering. There is a candle burning in this world of darkness, burning brighter and brighter every day. And Rabbi Mintz, you are one of the people holding one of the brightest candles right now. This organization is This organization is doing so much for me, never mind others. And may it continue to prosper and reach out and hold a candle for everybody. Judaism is an authentic spiritual treasure trove. Young people, feel the warmth and camaraderie of Shabbat lunch at your local Chabad house. What's the worst that can happen? You might eat too much gefilte fish. In particular, I urge you to expose yourself at least a little to Hasidus. Without Hasidus, I would never have been able to appreciate the rest of Judaism, and now it's all illuminated.
What part of Hasidus excites you the most?
That's hard to say. The Tanya, obviously. And before we get to Hasidus, the Hasidim, they walk the walk. They are what they talk about. They emanate. They serve. They only care about others. They're working tirelessly. And that in itself welcomes you home. Then, as you delve into Hasidus, it is the key. It's the key. It's not just rules, it's not just rituals, it's understanding the core of what's going on. As I was saying before, I never could appreciate Talmud. As a lawyer, I really have no patience for law, and I know that you can manipulate law. I know that a lot of the use of law is actually a deception. And it just seems like unnecessary, aimless rules. Well, as I've been telling you here recently, I now understand. It's the will of God. The rules are, yes, it's fine, there's a God, and He's given us commandments. How do we engage in those commandments? How do we carry them out? How do we perform mitzvot? It's all in the details.
Do you feel now that your neshama is lit?
It might be lit a little bit too much at the moment.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Yes. First of all, I'll finish chapter 2 of the Chabad of McGill story. My mother still lives in Montreal, and my father lived there until he passed away in 2012. And I was going back and forth, a few times a year. And I started going to Chabad of McGill again. Rabbi Shmuley Weiss, a wonderful man. And so I'd be going back to various occasions. One, the end of the high holidays, I flew over on Chol HaMoed and went for Sukkot, and there were a bunch of things going on, and then finally culminated in Simchas Torah. So it's just a regular fun time having Simchas Torah. And everybody's doing what? Hakafot?
Kavod, yeah.
And all of a sudden, the whole crowd runs down the stairs out onto the street, and I follow down. And as soon as I get to the bottom of the stairs on the street, Rabbi Weiss hands me the Torah. And I'm dancing around in the same spot where I saw other people dancing around 40 years before. And I'm realizing, hey, I've been here before. But now I'm the guy dancing with the Torah. And it was quite a moment. The two bookends, 40 years apart. Later on, I asked Rabbi Weiss, did you know what you were doing? Did you? Because I told him the other story. And he said, yeah, of course I did. Quite fetching. So the message, the concluding message, is never give up. Hashem truly does work in mysterious ways over prolonged periods of time. When you don't have a clue that anything is happening, something is happening. Little incidents, those glimpses I had earlier on, and actually there's another story I want to tell. But I'll just pause it for a second. The little glimpses over time that you don't even notice, suddenly, again, the next story is 50 years old. Or maybe not 50, more like 45. For some reason, I was in high school and I was not doing well. I was a confused kid who didn't want to study and was turned off to everything and just looking to be a cool guy. And because of that, I was missing a credit that I needed to graduate from high school. So I went to a class to make up the credit at Montreal High School. It was a small class. And in the class, I don't remember anybody else in the class. One person I remember, he was a Lubavitcher Chassid. And we started talking, and of course he ferrets out that I'm Jewish, and he starts telling me about Hasidus and the Hasidic way of life. And I'm polite. I don't really believe what he's saying, and I think it's kind of silly. But at the same time, he said, listen, you're pursuing all your materialistic pursuits. That's a waste of time. Doesn't matter. Basically, come home. And, I was polite, and I said, thank you, and then I just forgot about it. Well, I didn't, that's actually the point. I didn't forget about it. I dismissed it and moved on. But from time to time, up until I met you, I would just reflect back on that. I'd think about it. I'd think, what's going on here? You know, why did I continue to remember this one individual, this one chassid who planted one tiny little seed? Why did that seed stay there? Why did I remember? But it did. And even, you know, as I started to come back, there it was. And I'm still grateful to that gentleman today. So what appear to be minor events, even apparent non-events, which that was, can have a huge positive effect decades later.
If you like that video, hit the subscribe button and notification bell below for hours of the best Jewish content online.